There's a question that sounds kind of silly, but once you pull on the thread, it reveals something most people have never thought about.
Huh?
Why don't ants menstruate? The obvious answer would be, because they're insects, duh. Except that answer hides the most unsettling detail in this whole story. Because the problem isn't that ants are different from us. The problem is that almost no other animal on the planet menstruates. Not even most mammals, who are far closer evolutionary relatives to you than any ant will ever be. The real question isn't, why don't ants menstruate? It's, why do you menstruate when almost no other creature on Earth does the same thing? Let's start with the simple part, the ants, because there the explanation is straightforward. Ants don't have a uterus. They don't have the kind of uterine lining that builds up and breaks down every month, which is exactly the tissue that gets shed during menstruation. Reproduction in ants works in a completely different way. The queen simply lays eggs, continuously, with no cycle of building up and discarding tissue involved. And the strangest part is that, in most colonies, only the queen reproduces at all. The worker ants, who make up the overwhelming majority of the colony, have atrophied ovaries and never lay a single egg in their entire lives. There's no cycle because there's no biological structure that would generate one, and there's no evolutionary pressure to maintain that structure in bodies that will never use it. So far, nothing surprising. But now comes the part that flips this whole story on its head. If you look at mammals, your own biological category, the same category as dogs, cats, cows, and horses, the overwhelming majority of them don't menstruate either, at least not the way humans do. What they have instead is something called the estrous cycle, which looks similar in some ways but works in an almost opposite manner. In the estrous cycle, if fertilization doesn't happen, the uterine lining that was built up simply gets reabsorbed back into the animal's own body. Nothing gets expelled. It's recycled internally, with no visible blood loss. Menstruation, with visible bleeding expelled from the body, is actually a rare phenomenon in nature, pretty much restricted to humans, a handful of primates, and a small group of other species like certain bats and the elephant shrew. That's right, there are more species of bat that menstruate than species of dog. That means the question was never supposed to be about ants. The real question is, why did you, along with a tiny number of other mammals, evolve to waste blood and tissue every single month, instead of simply reabsorbing everything internally the way nearly the entire rest of the animal kingdom does? That's one of the most debated questions in evolutionary biology, and, here's the second twist in this story, there still isn't a definitive consensus among scientists about the answer. For decades, one of the most popular theories, proposed by a researcher named Margie Prophet, claimed that menstruation evolved as a way to flush pathogens out of the uterus brought in by sperm during sex. It sounded like an elegant explanation. Except when other researchers actually tested that idea by comparing primates with different levels of sexual promiscuity, the correlation simply didn't show up in the data. More promiscuous species didn't menstruate more often, or more heavily, than less promiscuous ones. The elegant theory didn't survive contact with real numbers. The explanation that's gained the most traction in recent years is even stranger, and it has to do with just how absurdly expensive human pregnancy is in energy terms. Building a thick uterine lining, rich in blood vessels, fully ready to receive an embryo, costs the body an enormous amount of energy. Keeping that structure active the entire time, waiting for a pregnancy that might not happen that month, would be a massive metabolic waste. Reabsorbing the tissue, the way most mammals do, also has an energy cost. But for species with extremely invasive placentation like ours, discarding it and rebuilding from scratch may actually be metabolically cheaper in the long run than maintaining or reabsorbing such a complex structure. In other words, you don't menstruate because your body is flawed. You menstruate because your body, over millions of years, calculated that throwing it out and rebuilding was more efficient than holding onto it. That alone would be a satisfying answer on its own. But there's one final layer, and it loops right back to the ants. The invasiveness of the human placenta, how deeply it burrows into maternal tissue to pull nutrients directly from the mother's blood, is one of the most extreme among all mammals. That kind of placenta gives huge advantages to fetal development, but it's expensive for the mother's body to maintain a compatible lining every single month, just in case a pregnancy happens. Ants never developed that kind of evolutionary pressure, because their reproduction doesn't depend on a complex organ rebuilding itself cyclically inside an individual body. It depends on a single queen laying eggs continuously, sustained by an entire colony of workers who gave up their own reproduction to make that possible. So the real story here isn't about ants being strange. It's about you being the rare exception within the mammal kingdom itself, part of a tiny group of species that traded simple energy efficiency for an expensive, complex reproductive system that, according to the most recent science, may be optimized to sustain the most demanding pregnancy on the planet. And before you close out this video, I pinned something in the first comment that I came across recently, and that ties directly into this topic. Worth taking a look.